One of my last conversations of the trip brought me to Otranto Township in north central Iowa, the site of a former town that once had thriving businesses and a school. And just down the road, close to my parents' place, is the home of Kurt and Paula Meyer. Kurt's the chair of the Democratic Party in the area and was kind enough to sit down and talk with me.
My name is Kurt Meyer. I am a long-time, deeply invested in Otranto Township, Mitchell County, Iowa. I go back 6 generations.
What about this community draws you to it?
It's nostalgia partly, it's sentiment partly, but it's also when you're from a place that says something about who you are. You are a local variety, as if you were a tomato or something. You know, I mean, that was bred here, and so I feel that sense of rootedness and a place. And this is the place. You know, the extraordinary kindness and hospitality and sort of reaching outness. I just made that term up.
I like it. I get what you're saying.
To Iowans, that is in part a based in community, and there's this wonderful sense where the numbers are such that we're only 1 or 2 concentric circles away from knowing and being able to connect to every single person in Mitchell County, you know, and there's a degree of a safety, and there's an element of gratification that comes from that, and you kind of can't hide, you know. I remember knocking on doors in 2008 and 2010, and in one case, an elderly woman said, "Are you Herb and Woletta's grandson?" My grandparents lived in Austin for many years, and I said, "Yes, I am." "Oh, they were both gone by then. I loved your grandparents." And I said, "So did I." And it was this emotional moment at someone's door where someone called out my grandparents. How great is that? That's part of that rootedness. So
yeah. Can you speak a little bit to your experience with politics in Iowa, in this area?
I chair the Mitchell County Democrats, and I formed the Tri-County Democrats, which is Worth, Mitchell, and Howard County. And I'm involved in politics at a statewide level. I am the chair of the Finance Committee of the Iowa Democratic Party. I'm involved in politics nationally with by chairing the Americans for Democratic Action, which is a group formed in 1947 by, among others, Eleanor Roosevelt and Reinhold Niebuhr and Walter Reuther and Hubert Humphrey, and iconic figures in the progressive democratic movement then and still now, for those of us that subscribe to those beliefs.
So you are maybe more equipped than most to be able to answer this question. I was looking at the statistics of the last national election and how the vote landed in Mitchell County. And what I discovered, at least from what I had read online, is that in the past 30 years, Mitchell County has voted for a Democratic presidential candidate. And in this last election, they ended up voting for Trump majority. Can you speak as to what you think caused that shift in Mitchell County's vote?
I think there was no one singular cause. I think some was a reaction to life is moving pretty fast, and maybe the idea of Trump being a bit of a throwback candidate to, you know, make America great again was a little bit of a yearning for things of years past, perhaps. And I think that, you know, there was maybe a latent sense in the greater community in Mitchell County that things are you know, sort of careening out of control a little bit. That maybe we need to put the brakes on. I think that's some of it. I think that there were some economic issues that surfaced that said, you know, I'm not feeling like I'm getting ahead. I'm not getting the pay increases. I'm dissatisfied with the status quo, and I think that came into play. There may have been some people that thought, you know, that didn't like the Democratic nominee, in this case Mrs. Clinton, that she wasn't, you know, someone that they took to or liked for various reasons, you know, and And I think that perhaps there was a general sense that, well, this Trump guy is kind of an interesting character. He didn't have a political record. He had not been really engaged in politics as we think of it. And so I think that there were some people that were willing to roll the dice on that and sort of take their chances. And I think those factors together meant that the election was swung quite decisively.
When you say that people feel like things are changing or moving too quickly, can you give examples of what you think that might be that people feel resistant to or worried about?
Oh boy, that's kind of hard to say. If you take a historical perspective, there have been times before when Vietnam protests and women's lib and civil rights, different movements would bubble to the surface, and people would say, "I'm not sure that that's really quite right, or it doesn't feel quite right," or and some of it is fear, and fear can be a powerful driver. And so, will that happen again next year in 2020? I don't know. I hope not. We're working to avoid it happening. A lot depends on who we nominate to head our ticket. And if I knew that, I would be Gene Dixon or Kreskin or somebody. I don't know who's going to win our nomination.
For people who don't live in Iowa, can you talk a little bit about the Iowa caucus, why it's important, how it works?
We caucus to choose delegates that then go up to first the county level, then the district level, congressional district level, ultimately the state level, and who will go to the national convention and cast their vote for a presidential candidate of choice. It's a interesting system, and it's different than going in for a primary and having the votes counted that way. It's a different organizational task because it requires one of two things. You either have to attend a caucus that takes place on a cold night I don't know how cold it's going to be, but it's going to be in February, so I assume it's going to be cold in the evening. But it's really quite a simple process where, and I'll give you the 2016 example, when we caucused in Otranto, Newburgh, the two townships caucused together. We caucused in Carpenter. And there were three candidates. There was O'Malley, there was Sanders, and there was Clinton. And it was it was one of those things where I said, all right, now everybody who favors Martin O'Malley, you meet over there. Everybody that favors Bernie Sanders, you meet over there. And everybody that favors Hillary Clinton, you meet over there. And people went to one of those three, in essence, corners of the room. And then we count up, and you say, well, if there are 25 of us, and there are 16 here, and 9 there, and 0 there, you get to have, the equivalent of 4 delegates. You get 2 delegates, and you get 0 delegates. It's that sort of system.
It's a very transparent process.
It's a very transparent process. You cannot, in essence, cast a secret ballot
at
a caucus. You have to, in essence, be physically, present and visible in your support for a candidate, which some people don't like. It's also open to persuasion. There are people say, "No, you can't go over there. Come on over here." This type of thing.
So people actually do engage with each other in that moment of choice
because we're neighbors.
They're trying to compel each other to go different places.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Well,
I don't think I actually realized that.
It's a terrific moment where,
Does it get heated?
It can, but there is a fair amount of, a pull-away opportunity. You say, Betty, you can't be caucusing with those people. Come on over here. Well, why should I caucus with? Because if you caucus with us, we'll make you our delegate. Well, I want to be a delegate. So then you better, join.
Wow.
There's horse trading.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting part of the process. And of course, the reason that the caucus is so important in Iowa is that Iowa is number one. We are first. We are the kickoff event in the political calendar for the nation. It's the first time actual voters, or in this case caucus attenders, can weigh in on a presidential choice. And so the reason that the caucus is important is that is electing delegates who are ultimately going to go to Milwaukee and cast a delegate vote for a particular presidential candidate. It's the delegate selection process that we do by caucus in Iowa, and because we're first, we get magnified coverage, and it's proportionally much more important than just those delegates because it's the first.
I want to maybe jump a little bit into the presidencies, this current presidency and the Obama presidency. As a Democrat, and now we're a few years out of the Obama presidency. What's your perspective in hindsight of that presidency?
Barack Obama was a terrific president. He not only was smart, he was wise. Not only was he an effective leader, he had this uncommon sense of integrity, of dignity, of carrying out the duties appropriate to the office. In the United States, the office of the presidency is a complex one. You have many different roles. One is to sort of be, leader of the party. One is to be, but there are also these wonderful moments where a president can speak to the higher calling that comes from the office, and the president current is mightily challenged to respond to that challenge, to respond to that part of the duty. And I don't wish to be critical of him. I just think that that's something that is not second nature to President Trump. When Barack Obama, in galvanizing moments, when people were killed in a church, for example, and the president would go to this funeral or go to a memorial service and start singing Amazing Grace. It was a magnificent moment. And the current president just can't do that in the same way. And so you say there are many roles for president. One is to advance legislation, not necessarily because, there's a legislative branch for that, but as you advocate, you're trying to get things done in Washington. One is appointing people to administrative posts, for example, to the cabinet. I don't think of any cabinet members in the Obama administration, which lasted 8 years, that didn't bring a sense of dignity and decorum to the office that they administered. When you look at the rogues gallery that has been appointed by the current president, you just kind of say, it would be difficult to, in some cases, the fox being in charge of the hen house. It's a ridiculous thing to have Betsy DeVos head the Department of Education. Are you kidding? There's no commitment to public education there. And you say, well, that would be one of the objectives of the Department of Education, wouldn't it? Most of the students in this country are going to public institutions. Why wouldn't we have a strong advocate on behalf of public education as the Secretary of Education? There are many different ways to participate in the process, and I think that because of misdeeds and awful choices that the current president has made, you say, well, some of the cabinet posts have been significantly diminished by the fact that they have not been effective administrators. I'll just leave it at that. They have not been effective administrators of the department that they were chosen to lead.
Do you think that was a conscious choice to put people who are not effective at the heads of those at the heads of those positions in order, to some extent, to dismantle those those areas of the government?
The question is, was it a conscious choice? The answer is yes. That's the shortest answer I'll give.
What else would you say about the presidency of Donald Trump?
I was disappointed when he was elected. There's no question about that. But yet, I'm an optimist. I had hopes that he would rise, that the dignity and the role and responsibility of the office would lift him, and that he would be as good a president that he could possibly be. I've been disappointed because I think that if there is a range in which he had a chance to operate, he has fallen closer to the floor than bumped against the ceiling. And I think we as a nation deserve better. So it's fair to say I've been disappointed. I want our presidents to be successful. Whether it's the person that I voted for or not, I don't want them to be disasters in office. I think this president has been a disaster in office. There you have it.
Let's say you're envisioning the future of this country, and let's let's say best case scenario. How do things go from here in your best case scenario of the future of the United States?
We set about on a course correction. We elected a Democratic House in 2016. In 2020, we take the next steps and we elect a Democratic Senate and a Democratic President. Now that has certain dangers to it because you say, oh, gee, it's all Democrats in charge, and certainly splitting the House and the Senate and what have you is possible and perhaps even likely. I have high hopes that we would make Donald Trump a one-term president. Not clear whether that will happen or not. I hope it will. I'm going to work hard to do what I can to contribute to that happening. But I'm an optimist about the country. I do think that the course that Obama set our country on, which I saw as a positive course, has now been altered by the current president. But the next president can alter it again. We tend to swing with presidencies and with circumstances that are in some cases sort of beyond our envisioning. What will be the crisis that is visited upon the American people in, say, 2021 or 2022? I don't know. I do hope that crisis is either anticipated or is being responded to by someone who with greater competency for the office than the incumbent now.
Hey, Kurt, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. It's great to see you, Ben.
Good to see you too. There's been a lot going on, right, since the last time you and I talked, and it was interesting. I've been editing the footage of last year, and you said sort of in a level of foreshadowing that I don't think that you realized you were. You said that who knows what sort of crises were going to come up in the next year or so, and that you hoped that there was strong leadership to guide us through those crises. Having sort of watched both the pandemic kind of unfold as well as the conversations around race and racial justice, what is your experience of the leadership that's been exhibited in the country?
This will not surprise you. I have felt our national leadership has been AWOL. it's been a very, very poor performance on their part. They've given contradictory messages. They've given messages that, first of all, it was going to be gone by Easter. We all knew that. And it's like, what have you been drinking? I realize the president does not drink, so that's the wrong statement to make. But he has not been able to get sort of his arms around a pandemic, which may ultimately, historians 20 and 40 and 60 years hence may say the reason that Trump only served one term, that's wood I'm knocking on, is that he was unable to step up to the major challenge of his presidency. And it wasn't war on a foreign field. It wasn't, the economy collapse is certainly a secondary factor, but the pandemic has not been his shining moment, and it was a golden opportunity. I think also I've been disappointed that the governor of Iowa, because a lot of this has now fallen to governors across the country to do the job, and whether you have an R or a D after your name is less important to me than that you get on top of the situation, that you enlist the world's or the state's or the country's finest public health minds. And I do think, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx at the national level are good minds. But if their say doesn't carry the day, then what's the difference? And I think that Governor Reynolds has also been disappointing in that regard. I think Governor Walz has done a better job, not perhaps perfect, but a much better job of making sure the pandemic was approached with facts in mind and making judgments that are based on best information available. I don't know that the response has much to do with what party you are. I think Governor DeWine in Ohio has been remarkably effective in fighting the virus. And some of the other governors have, even Democrats have been less effective. But I do think that it's important in a pandemic situation to get really good information and make decisions that can be tough, but are in the best interest of everybody involved. And back to your statement where I was doing some foreshadowing, that, my friend, was dumb luck. If you thought that I was able to look into a crystal ball when we spoke, in the summer of 19, I may have gotten lucky in that case.
Well, and I think what you were speaking to is just the importance of leadership and how inevitably our nation goes through from time to time crises, and that capable, intelligent, compassionate leaders can guide us through those moments. One of those moments, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if there is a great difference between the now two presidential candidates that are going to be on the ballot this fall, is the quality of empathy and the ability to connect and to put yourself in the shoes of another. That is I think for as long as Joe Biden has been in public life, in part because of the time when he came to public life, being sworn in a hospital room as his wife and daughter had passed on, and his sons were in the hospital when he started his Senate career in the early 70s till today. I think that empathy has sort of been his trademark. And I've never thought that, well, oh, that's great. I mean, that's nice that you have that. But you see, if I were on a 10-point scale going to score Joe Biden, I'd give him a 9.6 in regards to empathy, and President Trump, and I'm certain I could come up with a few good qualities of his, but I'd have to try. But empathy is not one of them. He would score, a 0.7 or less than 1. And so you have this huge divide. And empathy and the ability to project how that person must be feeling, or to project yourself into his or her dilemma or milieu, that's a very good quality for a leader to have, because then it spurs you on into action in ways that if you're sort of immune or deficient in that regard, it's very difficult to know. And I don't know that that will be the hinge on which the election swings, but I think that there are going to be a good many people who don't really affiliate with the party that will say, you know, I think we have to have somebody that we can connect to here. And I think that my hope would be that for people who take a long look at the two candidates who have a chance to be elected, that will be one of the decisive differences.
Yeah, I think that empathy is such an important factor in our time right now, whether it's the pandemic or, like you said, in leadership. And also, I think it's really important as we're navigating this moment of racial consciousness expansion. And I wanted to ask you, as somebody who lives in the Twin Cities, which was really, an area in which this all kind of came from, as well as somebody who lives in a rural area, and from my knowing of you, somebody who has members of different races within your family, how has that whole moment landed for you and Paula?
It's been difficult, to be honest with you. First of all, the George Floyd episode didn't happen in Louisville. It didn't happen in Memphis. It didn't happen in Atlanta. It happened in Minneapolis. And for some 6 decades, for me, Minneapolis has been this shining city on the hill. I mean, it's been where the action is, and it's been where people are enlightened and where horrible things do not happen. It's been a city where for as long as I've been alive, where basically it works, and it's dynamic and it's positive. And to have it happen in the Twin Cities, it could have happened anywhere, and yet it did happen in Minneapolis. And I think that there's sort of oh my goodness, this shouldn't be, and yet we have to say it was. And I think that if there's something good that happens from this terrible tragedy and the injustice of it all, I think that it provokes among all of us more thinking about what's this country really about, and is it right that this could happen in this day and age? If this were the 1830s or something, maybe we could maybe look back in history and say, well, they didn't quite have the understanding and what have you. But this is 2020, and the idea that an episode like the George Floyd murder, let's just call it what it was, could happen in Minneapolis, brings us all up short. And we all have some thinking to do about what this means and how we translate this into our lives and where we go forward.
You and your family, your community, actually organized something in southern Minnesota to talk about this. Can you tell us a little bit more about the event that you all had?
Yeah, our three congregations that work together. My congregation, which is Mona Lutheran, 6 Mile Grove Lutheran, and Mona and 6 Mile Grove have worked together for 140 plus years, and the congregation in Lisle, Our Saviors. Those three are now served by one structure and by one pastor, who happens to be my brother. I have 4 wonderful brothers. Scott is my youngest brother, and he thought when he wanted when my children were coming to see us in July, he wanted to have a community conversation about the subject of race, and he asked if specifically if my daughter and her husband, who are a mixed race couple, would be willing to present, and they said they would, and then they also approached my other daughter and her husband, both of whom are Anglos, if they would also participate. And it was very interesting, because one of the directions the conversation was took was to contrast the lives of these two men in their mid-30s, both with advanced degrees, both successful in their careers. Matt's a doctor, Andre is an insurance executive. And the white privilege that Matt has experienced because of his race, and the discrimination, prejudice, sort of the subjugation that Andre has felt because of his race, not necessarily always in Chicago where they live now, but throughout his life. And it's an interesting perspective, and it's only one that when we are aware of it or conscious of the bias that somehow creeps into our social being, that we can become sensitive, and then we can kind of pare it out of our lives. I mean, we can say that's unacceptable. And I think of, when I say pare it out, I think of a paring knife, just cutting it out as you would the eye of a potato. I mean, we don't need that part in the body politic, or in our society, in our churches, in our communities, in our neighborhoods. And yet it starts with awareness. And I don't know whether people who attended that night are more or less aware than others, but it was a very good conversation, and people came away feeling like it was a start. And I hope there's a next step and a next chapter. I know that it's sometimes difficult to take on social issues in congregations, but if congregations don't take them on, I mean, social issues, then who's it left to? I mean, what is it going to be left to schools? Is it going to be left to, the service clubs? Is it? So I feel very, very good about the fact that these rural congregations can address matters of race, and tapping people who at least in some cases whose parents have a deep commitment and deep love of the community.
We have the election coming up, which has its own difficulties and own unique dynamics. As somebody who is deeply involved, how are you feeling going into the election?
To the extent that you know me, Ben, I'm an optimist. I mean, I of course I'm feeling, I'm feeling that everybody will see at their own measure what I see, and that is a country that is pointed in the wrong direction by a party that seems to have lost sight of what we should be about. And so I'm optimistic that the corrective mechanism of the election will pull us back onto the right course, back out of the ditch and onto the road. And will that be an easy journey? No, of course not. It won't be easy to do that. To pull the vehicle out of the ditch takes a great deal of combined energy and power and what have you. But it's a necessary thing, and we have 70 plus days, and watching the first two nights of the Democratic Convention. We're talking on Wednesday. We've seen two nights, and those have been pretty impressive productions. I mean, not flawless, but they show the depth and the breadth of the great Democratic Party. And I am moved by it, both moved, emotion running down my cheek, but I'm also moved to, boy, that's good. Yes, that's terrific. I want to stand and cheer at many moments, and it's good to feel that. I'll come back to the initial statement, and that is, of course, I'm optimistic. I think that there is going to be a repudiation of the last 4 years, because the last 4 years have demonstrated the shortcomings of the incumbent and frankly his party.
Mm. Well, I think I'll leave it at that. I think that's a great way to wrap it up. Thank you, Kurt, for taking the time to catch up with me today. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm glad to know that you're on the ground in Iowa, serving people, and in Minnesota, and just being a community leader as you are.
Well, you're kind to say that. The pleasure is mine.
All right. Well, I will talk to you soon, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful to see you.
Good to see you too.
Next time on Home Again. I sit down with my little sister and brother-in-law and his parents, Lisa and Merlin Bartz. Merlin was a Republican senator in the Iowa Senate, and we all got to sit down together and talk about the conservative perspective of the last 12 years. All this and more on the next episode of Home Again, Conversations from the Heartland.